As a young girl, the main group activity in Susan Cain's family was reading. And while that may seem antisocial to you or I, for her and her family, it was just a different way of being social. The Power of Introverts by Susan Cain. When I was 9 years old, I went off to summer camp for the first time, and my mother packed me a suitcase full of books. And I had this vision of 10 girls cozily reading in their matching nightgowns. Camp was more like a keg party without any alcohol. I did my best, but I really just waited for the times when I could go off by myself and read. All the time, I got the message that somehow my quiet and introverted style of being was not necessarily the right way to go, and that I should be trying to pass as more of an extrovert. And I always sensed it deep down that this was wrong. But for years, I denied this intuition. Now this is what many introverts do. 1/3 to 1/2 of the population are introverts. 1/3 to 1/2. So even if you're an extrovert yourself, I'm talking about your coworkers and your spouses and your children and the person sitting next to you right now. All of them subject to this bias, which is pretty deep and real in our society. We all internalize it from a very early age without even realizing that's what we're doing. Now, to see this bias clearly, you have to understand what introversion is. It's different from being shy. Shyness is about a fear of social judgment. Introversion is more about how do you respond to stimulation. So, extroverts really crave large amounts of stimulation, whereas introverts feel they're most alive when they're in quieter, more low-key environments. So now here's where the bias comes in. Our most important institutions, our schools and our workplaces, are designed mostly for extroverts, and for extroverts need for lots of stimulation. So if you picture the typical classroom nowadays, it's going to have pods of desks with 4 or 5 kids all facing each other, and they are working in countless group assignments, even in subjects like math and creative writing, which you'd think would depend on solar flights of thought. And for the kids who prefer to just go off by themselves or work alone, they're seen as outliers often, or worse, problem cases. Now the same thing is true in our workplaces. Most of us work in open plan offices without walls, and when it comes to leadership, introverts are routinely passed down for leadership positions. But interesting research by Adam Grant at the Wharton School has found that introverted leaders tend to deliver better outcomes than extroverts do, because when it comes to managing these proactive employees, they are much more likely to let them run with their ideas. Now, in fact, some of our most transformative leaders in history have been introverts. Eleanor Roosevelt, Rosa Parks, Gandhi, all of these people describe themselves as quiet and soft-spoken and even shy. And they all took the spotlight, even though every bone in their bodies was telling them not to. And this turns out to have a special power all its own, because people could feel that these leaders were at the helm, not because they enjoyed directing others, and not because they enjoyed being looked at. They were there because they had no choice, because they were driven to do what they thought was right. We all fall at different points along the introvert-extrovert spectrum, and some people fall right in the middle. But most of us do define ourselves as one type or the other. And what I'm saying is that culturally, we need a much better balance. And this is especially true when it comes to creativity and to productivity, because when psychologists look at the lives of the most creative people, what they find are people who are very good at exchanging ideas and advancing ideas, but who also have a serious stroke of introversion in them. And this is because solitude is a key ingredient to creativity. Theodor Geisel, better known as Dr. Seuss, dreamt up many of his amazing creations in a lonely office in his house. Now, I'm not saying that we should all stop collaborating, but I am saying that solitude matters. And if you look at the world's most major religions, you'll find seekers who are going off by themselves to the wilderness, where they then have these profound epiphanies and revelations that they bring back to the rest of the community. So, no wilderness, no revelations. If you look at the insights of contemporary psychology, it turns out that we can't even be in a room of people without mimicking their ideas and opinions, even about seemingly personal and visceral things like who you're attracted to. You will start aping the beliefs of the people around you without even realizing that's what you're doing. And groups famously follow the opinions of the most dominant or charismatic person in the room, even though there is zero correlation between being the best talker and having the best ideas. So if all this is true, then why are we getting it so wrong? Why are we setting up our schools this way and our workplaces? And why are we making these introverts feel so guilty about just wanting to go off by themselves some of the time? One answer lies deep in our cultural history. Western societies, and in particular the US, have always favored the man of action over the man of contemplation. But in America's early days, we lived in a culture of character, where we valued people for their inner selves and their moral rectitude. And if you look at the self-help books from this era, they all had titles with things like character, the grandest thing in the world. But then we hit the 20th century, and we entered a new culture, the culture of personality. And what had happened is we had evolved an agricultural economy to a world of business. So people were moving from small towns to big cities, and instead of working alongside people they've known all of their lives, they're having to prove themselves in a crowd of strangers. So, quite understandably, qualities like magnetism and charisma suddenly come to seem very important. So, the self-help books changed to meet these new needs, and they start to have titles with things like How to Win Friends and Influence People. Now, none of this is to say that social skills are unimportant, and I'm also not calling for the abolishing of teamwork at all. But I am saying that the more freedom we give introverts to be themselves, the much more likely that they are to come up with their own unique solutions to our problems. So I just published a book about introversion, and it took me about 7 years to write. But now my job is very different, and my job is to be out here talking about it, talking about introversion. And what has helped is my sense, my belief, and my hope that when it comes to our attitudes towards introversion, we truly are on the brink of dramatic change. So I'm going to leave you now with 3 calls for action for those who share this vision. 1, stop the madness for constant group work. People should serendipitously come together and have an exchange of ideas. It's great for introverts and it's great for extroverts. But we need much more solitude and much more freedom and much more autonomy at work and school. 2, go to the wilderness. Be like Buddha. Have your own revelations. And 3, remember my suitcase full of books from summer camp? Look at what's inside your own suitcase and why you put it there. So extroverts, maybe your suitcase is also full of books. Or maybe it's full of champagne glasses or skydiving equipment. Whatever it is, I hope you take these things out every chance you get and grace us with your energy and your joy. But introverts, you probably have the impulse to guard very carefully what's inside your own suitcase. But occasionally, I hope you will open up your suitcase for the world to see, because the world needs you, and it needs the things you carry. So I wish you the best of all possible journeys and the courage to speak softly. Thank you very much.